And that leaves me as the last one to talk to you right before the drinks. And one of the cool things is actually this talk should have been called Why Security Fails, because Ronald has decided to sponsor my next book on why security fails, and a couple of things that passed right now are the things that will also be in it, but today is about security is, in Dutch, rot. And rot is basically regulation, organization, and technology. If you want to create a fire, you need three things: fuel, temperature, and oxygen. And for a lot of organizations, security is only technology. Well, we've just seen that's not true. It's apparently also organizational. And it is also regulation. Let's keep it simple. Because there's a lot coming our way, a lot of people are complaining about it. I'll make all the regulation very simple. Europe is doing only one thing. They help us think in risks, and they expect us to deal with those risks. And they make one party responsible, being the top dog. That's what the majority of the regulations and the acts are doing. And I'm kind of appalled by a lot of LinkedIn posts that say, like, companies need to adhere to the NIS2. Bullshit. There isn't a single company that has to adhere to the NIS2. Countries have to adhere. Countries have to make laws, and we have to adhere to these laws. That's something different. In all cases, for instance, the GDPR, it's very clear who's responsible. It's not the data protection officer. It's not the chief privacy officer. It's the controller, the top dog. If he or she screws up, it's their risk. They are, talking Rasky, accountable. If you look at the directive NIS2, members of the management bodies, etc., and they have to go back to school, which I think is a good thing, because knowledge is something that is really, really failing. If you look at the ISO 27001 or the bio or for healthcare, it is the controller, the top dog, the top management who's responsible. If you're not top management, you in this room are not responsible, even though they try to make us sometimes responsible. And what should management do for the most part? And you notice that I'm talking about a lot of laws at the same time, because most of them really say the same. You have to have goals. Goals for your organizations, because that will determine the goal of your security. You have to have policies. You have to have roles, tasks, and authorities. So basically, I see people making photographs of the slides. You will get the slides if you want them, no problem. But you have to do your basics. And if you have a proper organization, you would have written down this already. So you are not responsible, the top executive is responsible. That's the top dog. So let's talk organization then. And let's walk in the shoes of a CISO. And the story I'm telling you here truly happened. Of course, the organization and the name are not mentioned because I think it's so generic actually, even though it's a shocking story, that it's always the same. Karel has a weekend off, having fun, going to the beach. And it's been a long time since he had his last holiday, and he gets his notification that there are multiple accounts compromised. Compromised in a part of the organization that runs their own email. The backup security staff member turns out to be unreasonable, so Karel, his single day off, joins the meeting to start helping. So it turns out that one of the reasons that this part of the company was allowed to run their own email was that they had to have an anti-phishing tool. Here are the tools again. But you know, anti-phishing sometimes gives you false positives. So let's disable this tool because it makes so much noise. Karel is easy going and say like, okay, reset the accounts, hand out new passwords, and inform the board. The business unit refuses to do so. So ultimately, they decide to reset only the 10 accounts that are compromised by sending those 10 people an email. Click on this link to reset your account. The criminal organization clearly does that, changes the password, so the legitimate users cannot use their email anymore. And a couple of hours later, hundreds of thousands of emails are being sent. Again, Karel suggests to inform the board. And to avoid serious damages for the company, he starts to work on the blacklist to get his company removed from the blacklist. And it works. Again, he advises, reset all the accounts and have people log in. And you've had a security incident, please do so. On Saturday it's quiet, nothing happened, but on Sunday he's being invited to explain everything to his manager the next day. And Karel is writing down a list of key points that really needs to happen. On Monday, the manager starts a monologue. Karel is being pushy. She questions if it's really his role to deal with incidents. She questions actually what is your role in general as a CISO. And you've said twice that we have to go to the board. So you've been blackmailing us. And also she says, I talked to somebody who knows cybersecurity, and they say that after 24 hours there's no point in resetting accounts. So your advice was faulty. And thus, we think you should resign. And when he said, yes, but I've got like ongoing meetings, she said, well, then you say that you're sick. He called me crying, and I said, I hear you saying now that you should report yourself sick, so please do so. On the Dutch law, that's a smart move. He ended up with a legal conflict. He had to leave the organization, and he's been pretty depressed because of it. Now let's do the analysis here. Again, it's regulation, organization, and technology. Who's really responsible? It's the board, it's the chief executive. So, if responsibilities are vague, the top dog is here to blame, not Karel. And if you're angry that you're uncertain if the CISO should deal with the incident, you're basically angry at the top dog, not at Karel. And as I've been telling you, Karel was talking to a manager. Karel wasn't talking to the board. There was no boardroom level access for Karel. So basically, he had to talk to an incompetent manager, I think it's fair to say, that has really no knowledge of cybersecurity. So you've been barking at the wrong tree, basically. And if you're not in the boardroom, there's a very simple rule. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So Karel was calling himself a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, but Karel wasn't a chief. And it was kind of funny at a certain point. He couldn't explain to his lawyer how things work, so the lawyer called me and he said, like, I'm calling you regarding the CISO employee. And I said, like, okay, sir, you now made a remark that will hit my next book. Because this is really what it is. CISO employee. You're not listed in the Chamber of Commerce, so you're not a chief, period. And if you think this is a big deal, talk to Barend. Barend was telling really cool stories because he was talking operational. Ask a child what they want to become and they never say, you know what? I think it's cool to be 8 hours a day in a boardroom. I think that's really cool. They will always say that they want to do something operational. So I'm not delivering you bad news. I'm liberating you of a lot of shit. And what is also very clear, Karel wasn't protected from being sacked. Where a data protection officer under the GDPR has protection, that protection does not exist for us in security. That's very important to remember. And then, of course, there's another thing, because it's not only the CISO can't help it and it's also bad. And no, that's not true. There's also a part that we have to change. Because a lot of us go into a boardroom when we get the opportunity and talk tech to somebody who doesn't understand tech. And if we think something is important, we might try to get to the boardroom each and every day. Talk language that somebody else does not understand without an interpreter. The workplace, let's say, like, you know, you can't bring a gun to work to say, like, okay, you've got a safe workplace now. But that is basically what happened to Karel. And his role was ambiguous. It was unclear what his responsibilities are. Well, he clearly had no management support, and if something goes wrong, he takes the blame. Also, it is very clear, and this is what I see in a lot of companies, also for instance with pen testers, you deliver a result, and they say like, yeah, but we don't think it's that serious. Think about you going to the doctors and they say like, oh, you've got diabetes. I think you're wrong. You know, it's not normal behavior. Why are we doing it with professionals when it's about security? And the feedback was clearly negative and more intimidating than really feedback. And it is very clear that the authority is undermined. And that leads to a stressful situation with a lot of distrust. And if you look at studies, especially from the International Labour Organization, they look worldwide, a lack of structure is one of the most important causes of a psychological unsafe work environment. And now you wonder, why is this more in security than anywhere else? Because an average CISO lives in an organization for 2 to 4 years. And most of them don't leave because they want to leave. Or you're being psychologically brought to the point that you really want to leave, but that's still, I don't think you really want to leave then, because you've been pushed there. Because we deal with structure all the time. If you want to pass your ISO 27001, the structure must be in place. Else there's no point in calling an auditor. What do a lot of CISOs do? If things are messed up, they start to fix it for the top dog. They don't get paid for it, and they do it anyway. So you're messing with the structure that the top management never bothered to really make work. So let me be really short, that doesn't, that doesn't add up. It doesn't fly. If it does fly, you're lucky, but in most cases it won't fly. And then it's, well, that is so strange, this Karel guy, he's a nice guy, but he was basically acting as if he were in the boardroom. The other thing is, cybersecurity has a price, and there are some surveys that have been done, and it's pretty clear in the Netherlands, the government advisory body for cybersecurity has calculated that an average amount of 10 to 20% of all your ICT costs should be spent on security. Given some people smiling now, I think most of you don't spend that money on security. If you think about it, how smart is that then? So far for organization. Let's talk technology. I'm not totally against dogs. Let's, for instance, start years ago. We built a satellite to fly past Venus, only 9 kilograms with 54,000 components. Really cool. It was launched on July 2nd, 1962. And after nearly 5 minutes, the range safety officer decides to let the rocket explode because readings were wrong. The initial damage was $18.5 million, which nowadays would be $192 million. So this was an expensive joke. And the thing that was failing in the software was a simple hyphen. Okay, so we've learned from that and never made the same mistake, right? So the Russians tried to do something with Mars. Let's, send a satellite to pass Mars. So they launched it in 1988. And at a certain point, they realized they couldn't reach the object anymore, so they couldn't adjust the course, so the device never reached Mars. Now, the thing was, they did an extensive investigation and found out that a single hyphen character was missing. June 4th, 1996, ESA is launching the Ariane 5 rocket, and I wrote 4 because the software they installed was actually meant for the Ariane 4, not the 5. So it showed normal behavior for almost 36 seconds and then decided to self-explode. They lacked system tests. The development program did not include adequate analysis and testing. Or let's make trading software that we don't test. There was this company who made a robot, and they installed new software and they tested it earlier, and it decided in 45 minutes to buy for $7 billion of shares that nobody asked for. So they had to sell it again, and they lost $440 million. They were fined also by the Federal Trade Commission $12 million, because it has an effect. If you spend $7 billion, it has an effect on the course, and that's kind of not allowed. So you see also here bad testing again, and a very expensive joke. Let's talk the OWASP top 10. We all know it. It's a list that we make. And we see the 10 same issues over and over and over again. For over 20 years, SQL injection, or injections in general, were the #1 cause. Over 20 years. So we're kind of slow in learning. Now, if you look at projects in general, the Standish Group analyzes a lot of projects. They've done so since 1995. And only 31% of all projects are successful. Most are, and successful is defined as on time, on budget, with a result where the customer says, yeah, that's what I wanted. 90% are never finished, and 50% are either not on time, or too expensive, or with a result that is not satisfactory. Other surveys are even more negative on the success rate. So long story short, it's not a success number. Us making software is a bad story. And if we not look at the value of the project, but the damage being caused, because then we're talking cybersecurity again, because then we're talking risk again. We're not talking about millions. We're not talking about billions. We're talking about trillions. And I've written out the numbers because it's excessively bizarre how expensive this is. And they estimate for 2020 that the worth of failed projects was 260 billion in the US alone. And operational disruptions of 1.56 trillion. In Europe, we haven't got a clue. It's there. It is more than just the statistics here. We can't say a failed project or bad software is just an isolated incident. We create shitty software. And shitty software is a problem for cybersecurity. And you heard it actually on stage earlier, accepting the risk. I still wonder if people really know what they accept, but we have this culture of mediocrity. You know, we accept technical depth. I'll get back to that in a second. We see, for instance, things from a pen test as a feature request. And we sometimes just say, yeah, it's a bug, but we accept it. And then even if you have technical depth or you've got this list of things that you need to fix, we create a job for people maintaining these type of lists. It's close to insanity. I only have one thing, you know, we should get rid of these kind of jobs because it's bizarre. You know, accepting mediocrity is an expensive job, we shouldn't do it. You can't say, I'm not watching, I'm not listening, I'm not talking. We should really do something about that. And then sometimes people say to me, for instance, from government bodies, it's just money. There are no deaths because of bad software. Let's put that to the test. And then when I compare things to aviation, they say, like, yeah, but aviation is about life and death. Okay, so let's start with a radiation therapy device in the 1980s. Software failed, people burned and died. Toyota made software for cars that sometimes arbitrarily would hit the gas. And it's pretty obvious people have died because of that. There were researchers and they concluded that they used spaghetti code. They had no coding standards. If you would use coding standards, they had, for instance, over 80,000 rule violations. But what I thought was far more interesting, they used more than 10,000 global variables for their software. You think about it for a second if you know coding. That's really bizarre. CrowdStrike, remember that one of last year? We tested it in March, we believed it to be okay, so we did an update in June. Long story short, only Delta Airlines alone claims to have lost $500 million. What I found to be very interesting when that happened, that all of a sudden I realized this was an organizational issue as well. Because apparently, you as an organization were not responsible for the update, but another company was. I wonder how many boardrooms had an item on the agenda. Let's talk about the outsourcing of kernel updates to a different company. And now we're back at the organization. In 1991, during the Gulf War, it turned out that the Patriot system had a timing error and sometimes missed a Scud missile. One hit at a camp and 28 people died. We've had multiple infusion pumps that sometimes gave too much or too little medication to people. People died. In the Netherlands, we had the supplements affair. That was Bulgarians committing fraud for maybe 4 million euros. It could go as high as that. So Parliament was up in the arms and said, like, something needs to be done. Well, something turned out to ask a computer for a list of fraudsters. And as of that moment, that was the actual list. And then you say, people didn't die. We've had suicides because of this, of innocent people being accused to be a fraudster. I'll get back to this one in a second. Then we have the 737 MAX. Boeing is better in building planes, I agree. And they can increase the plane and it will always function the same. So we don't have to retrain the pilots. How cool is that? So Boeing wanted to do the same, so they wanted to increase the 737. Then it turned out that if a plane is bigger, you need bigger engines, but the 737 is a very low plane. So the engine would get too low, so they changed the location, but yeah, then the aerodynamics changed, and somebody in their right mind said, let's fix that in the software. And to make sure that this wasn't really an issue, we didn't tell the pilot about this software, because if we would tell them, we would have to retrain them. Retrain them is money. Money is expensive. This is how the software industry works. And it killed hundreds of people. The thing, however, is a plane is not software industry, it's airline industry. So bad validation, bad dealing with these type of stuff is a very expensive game. For Boeing, all in all together, the bill might add up to $55 billion. With the surcharge affair, the current estimation is $14 billion, but the expectations are that this will be a lot higher. So to save 4 million euros, we've now spent $14 billion, 3,500 times as much. Or let's put it in a different way. If you think safety is too expensive, try an accident. With Boeing, the interesting part was, it's not the first time that this happened. In 1991, a Scandinavian Airlines flight crashed. Fortunately, nobody died because of ice in the engine. And the pilot did the right thing. Pull back on the gas handle. However, there was this new system, the automatic thrust restoration system, and the name says it already. Thrust was restored. Because the computer thought, like, that's strange. Just after takeoff, pulling back on the gas, that can't be right. Oh, let's reopen it. But because of that, the ice basically destroyed the engine, and both engines flamed out, and the plane crashed. So learning from the past is still an issue. Now, if we look at all these things, you hear a lot of techno-optimism. The belief that when we make software, it will be perfect this time, even though we don't have that track record. And techno-optimism is a scientific term where we also have determined that there is a reduced sense of reality. So if somebody is critical, we shut down the critical voice. voice is generally critical. Anybody who is risk aware. Now, if you look at projects again, you see basically a lot of spaghetti code because we've got poor requirements. If we've got poor requirements, we've got poor collaboration in the demands what we want. That basically leads to bad design, and bad design generally leads to bad coding. We have project managers that love to have really tight deadlines. And basically, what do you do if you've got a strong deadline? If you want to meet that deadline, you start cutting corners. That leads to technical depths, and here is your problem in a nutshell. And then there's something other that is really strange, especially with governments, but I also see it in companies. There are people that believe that software can be ready, can be finished. And some organizations define a failed project if the software is not finished. So Office 365 is a failed project because it's different every day. It's a strange way of arguing, but it happens. It happens. And thus maintenance is also forgotten. And now you've got technical debt, bugs, a long list of wishes, and no maintenance on the software. What could possibly go wrong? Fortunately, the law is now demanding more and more that we use software bill of materials. You need to know what is in your software. But that means that we rely on other people's software. Now the mind jump from having a piece of software somewhere to ultimately making it into an airplane or a medical device or anywhere else is not that far-fetched anymore. Failure next level, because, you know, we're not killing enough people just yet. So next level is vibe coding, using AI to code. So let's rephrase what happens here. We built an AI model. We collect a lot of code that has been created under an excessive time pressure, feed this to the model, appoint people to interact with the code or with the model. And, you know, why would we learn them how to program? Because, you know, AI will fix this all for you. And then let the model choose the language. And typically what they will choose a lot is Perl, but even more, JavaScript. If one language is perfect for spaghetti code, it's definitely JavaScript. I'm waiting for the day that we'll hear of companies that will build a core business based on vibe coding because it's so much more cost effective. I'm really curious to see how that will end. If you want to have success, it turns out that the road to success is not actually that expensive or complicated. One of the things that we need to have is engagement. And truly executive support that understands what they are getting. And the Standish Group also points out that staff needs to be skilled. And I want to stop here because a couple of times during the day I've heard speakers talk about training. And when we think about training, we've got a new product, we'll train you for 10 minutes, and then you're the expert. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a soccer match of Ajax against Twente, and when they were playing, I realized these men work now for 3 hours a week, and the rest of the time they spend training. But the game is always the same. The rules don't change. The field is always the same. You know, the distances are the same. Everything is the same. And what do? Train, 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 train. Take a grown-up industry like the airline industry. A pilot has to train for more than 80 hours a year to recertify. If Barend wants to use his gun, He needs to shoot so many times at the shooting range, else they take it away from him. And now we are in the IT industry, and we think, you know what? You've been to university, so for the next 5 years, you're going to work. What could possibly go wrong here? For the sake of time, there are 3 main success factors for software projects: a good place, a good team, a good sponsor. It's that simple. And one of the coolest things that Standish says, like, the most success is being met with agile methodologies and continuous projects. Not big, complex projects. And one of the main disturbing factors, and sorry if you're a project manager, turn out to be project managers who set arbitrary goals. It's not me who's saying that, it's the Standish Group. I found this to be very inspiring. They say we should avoid assigning managers to projects and reduce the use of project management tools. It saves you a lot of money and it makes your world a lot safer. The other thing is just having a test culture, accepting that this is part of our life. If the project is late, testing is late. Accept it as a fact of life. Have a good CI/CD pipeline. It's really annoying. I love also, I deliver pen tests. It is really annoying if you've got a customer, they make a mistake, can happen. They fix it, nice. Okay, now you will pass your test and the auditor is happy. And then 4 months later, they've built this new system for a new customer. They want a pen test. And we find the very exact mistakes. Because nowhere is linting or anything used to make sure that this bug doesn't, remain there. If you read the BBC, bbc.com a lot, you keep seeing articles about the Air India flight that crashed. Why? Because we want to know what happened and we want to fix that failure. It's okay that the plane crashes. It's not okay if it's a second time for the same reason. So this is why we want to learn and, banish mistakes that you make. In software industry, we grow silent. So test, test, test. Can it be done? Because that's what I hear. But this is nice theory. It can't be done in practice. Well, I was once part of a project during the COVID pandemic where we built a system and our risk appetite was none. If there was a bug with a CVSS 4.0 or more, the software would not go live. Period. End of discussion. And the pen tests were sent to Parliament. So software developers said yeah, but if you send this to Parliament, then everybody can read about the mistakes. What can I do about it? So I went well, you can test yourself before the pen tester comes. What do you think happened to the quality of the software? How many regression bugs do you think we had? None. So as of today, we're going for a drink. You can make a difference. You can say no to mediocrity. You can say no to incompetent approaches for making software. Because I hope that all of you share the feeling that we should really have safer environments. And I'd say make cats safe again. And when you go home, you'll get a bag. In the bag will be a QR code. When you go to the site that Access 42 has made there available. You can get my latest book, my newest book, as soon as it's ready. I'm still writing, so that will be somewhere later this year. But first the quality checks, and then, of course, the release. And then it will be sent to you thanks to Ronald Kingma. So thank you very much for that, Ronald. And this would be a nice moment to open the floor for questions. Was this death by PowerPoint? That everybody is so silent now?
I think everyone wants some cool drinks, cool beers, cool...
Yeah, me too.
Fresh. One question. Thank you for your speech, Breno. I was triggered by what you said in an early slide, that the most important part for the project is to have a goal, and that senior management should set the goal. I somewhat disagree with that, because I think senior management should start out with a vision and then articulate a goal within that vision. Because if you have a goal, people are going to focus on the goal, but if you share the vision first, they can self-steer within the context of the vision. What do you think of that?
How many top executives do you know that have a clear vision?
Anybody who's been through the military will have a clear vision.
Sorry, anybody?
Anybody who's been through the military will have a clear vision, because that's what they're trained to do.
That's what it should be, but unfortunately I see a lot of companies where that isn't there. I see a lot of companies where I ask, what is the company goal, which is needed for the ISO 27001? You know, what are we protecting here? Mm-hmm. A lot of companies can't answer that question. I
agree. And if you look at not only ISO, but also the GRC, the risk management, you have mission, vision, values, right? So I'm trying to marry those two.
I agree on that one, and maybe I'm, you know, cutting some corners here because of the time, and I agree on that. But the thing is, you know, getting the focus from top management, and there's also for security, it's very hard. And we also have to learn that we are not strategic. We are a precondition to be able to reach that goal. You know, we have to change as well. We have to learn that, you know, we are not strategic, unfortunately, or happily, and be tactical and operational. But yes, you can't do it if you don't know in which direction you're going.
Which is why I'm arguing that vision is so important.
A fair point. I think with the drinks, that's something that we should touch. I don't think we really disagree, actually.
I agree.
You agree that we don't disagree? Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you for that. I couldn't agree more with everything you said related to the software process in the current industry. I've seen the same all over the world, and nothing changes. I'm putting my hopes on political changes now that devs are falling in more areas where software is being applied, that the law will also put pressure on software companies to actually deliver a working product. Because that's the only thing that has been missing for the last 50 years in our industry. Yeah. Like you said, the parliament would see how sloppy a process would have been was a big stick.
And the cool thing is we are getting the Cyber Resilience Act. That is, I think, a very big first step in organizing this within Europe. So as soon as managers start bitching about that, you know, start bitching about how much money they're throwing away because they don't embrace this kind of legislation. Because at the end of the day, if a software company becomes liable for the product they make, it's kind of bizarre that you can make a product and have no liability whatsoever. That in itself is close to insanity.
Yeah, I make jokes about it to everybody that I have to explain my job to.
Thank you.
No more?
Then I would like to thank you as well, Breno, like you did with all the others. Yeah, give him a great round of applause.
Thank you.
He gave it away many times, but here also for you a nice bottle of Italian wine.
Grazie mille.